In the northeast of Utah lies a cattle ranch that many argue is the paranormal hotspot of the world. It's in a remote location of the countryside, inaccessible all but for a winding dirt trail. The landscape is dominated by large grassy plains, pockets of ominous woodlands, and brooding mountain ranges. The ranch has 3 different homesteads, each comprised of 2 or 3 farmhouses. All but one is abandoned. It has for the last 2 decades housed scientists, investigators, and security personnel. They're all there with 2 goals in mind: to document the paranormal phenomena and to keep visitors away from the dangerous entities that terrorize this remote location. To truly understand what Skinwalker Ranch is and why you should never seek it out, we must first turn to the terrifying experiences of the Sherman family. Though there have been unusual paranormal phenomena associated with the ranch for decades, it wasn't until 1994 when things took on a decidedly malevolent turn. A family of cattle farmers called the Shermans bought the ranch and moved in, despite being warned that the land on which the ranch sat is cursed. On the very first day, they became intimately acquainted with the strangeness of that place. Terry Sherman and his wife Gwen had brought cattle with them to the ranch and were helped by their teenage son and 10-year-old daughter. While standing outside of their farmhouse that day, they saw something emerge from the tall grasslands that surround them. It looked like a wolf, but it was larger than any wolf Terry had ever seen before, and he was an experienced tracker and outdoorsman. It was so large that even when on all fours, it could almost look a grown human in the eye. The wolf moved towards the pen where some of the Sherman's cattle were being kept. Before Terry and his family could react, it grabbed the head of a young calf through a fence and began to drag it out between the bars. Terry opened fire on the animal 6 times before it finally relented, disappearing back into the tall grass and bushes. When they tracked the animal, they assumed that they would find it lying dead somewhere from its injuries, but there was no blood. The only evidence of the animal was a piece of the wolf's flesh that had been blown off during the fight. What confused the Shermans the most was that the animal's paw prints led to a small creek nearby where they abruptly stopped. It was as if the wolf had vanished into thin air. When Terry and his family returned to their cattle, they took a closer look at the piece of the wolf's hair, skin, and tissue that had been left on the ground from an exit wound. It looked old, as if it belonged to an animal that had died days ago, rotten and decaying. Everything about that day was confusing for the Shermans. Due to the strangeness of the animal, the family looked through the books of wolf species to try and identify it so that they knew what was living nearby. They wanted to know if it posed a threat to humans as well as cattle. The only thing close to what they saw that day was an artist's impression of a dire wolf, a gigantic species of wolf that had gone extinct 10,000 years ago. While none of this made sense to the Shermans, their lives were about to take a turn from bewilderment into uncharted and dangerous territory. The encounter with the wolf was only the start of the terror that stalked the Shermans at their ranch. The strange animal seemed to represent a growing dread that fell upon the grounds surrounding the homestead, almost as if in fighting the thing off, the Shermans had only brought attention to themselves. But the attention of what? While exploring the property, Terry and his family found some unusual things at the farmhouse that hinted at how bad things were about to become. The previous owners seemed to have taken security extremely seriously, with large chains for guard dogs and deadbolts on all doors and windows of the house. It quickly became clear that the previous owners were scared of something, and that was why they sold the property. Bizarre things soon began to happen around the ranch after that. Terry Sherman's gas-powered post digger, a heavy piece of equipment, disappeared without a trace. When he bought another one, he then immediately found his lost digger 12 meters or 40 feet up a tree. In another instance, a chainsaw the Shermans were using disappeared and then, within moments, reappeared on the opposite side of a large field. Terry and Gwen's son had also transported a large number of wooden posts to one side of the ranch to build a fence, only to go inside for a glass of water and come back out to see that they had vanished. He soon found them hundreds of yards away from where they had originally been. In the aftermath of these bizarre events, the Shermans soon began to believe that the phenomena on the ranch had a trickster quality to it. It was as though an intelligence existed there, out of sight, and was toying with them deliberately. This got worse when things started to happen inside the Sherman homestead. Objects would be scattered around when no one was looking, and strange voices could be heard speaking a language that the Shermans did not understand. The tone from these voices was clear, however. They were mocking the family. Friends who visited the ranch also encountered these unnerving events there. On more than one occasion, they saw large animals prowling around outside that didn't quite fit any normal description, and they saw orbs and lights in the sky moving around overhead. UFOs started to become a regular occurrence. The Shermans had invested all of their money in the ranch, and they didn't want it to fail. They could cope with the phenomena if it was merely moving things around and scaring them occasionally, but what they could not cope with was the death of their cattle. Some of the Shermans' cattle began to disappear, much like the objects had before, but then they would reappear somewhere else on the property. Often, the bulls and cows would be injured, and in some instances, it was as if they had been dropped from a height onto the ground, like they had materialized high several meters above and then broken their legs due to a subsequent fall. On 3 separate occasions, Terry discovered one of his cows dead, the body mutilated and missing parts with seemingly surgical precision. This includes holes carved out of the eyes, like someone or something was sneaking onto the ranch at night and then taking samples from the animals there. On another occasion, Terry responded to one of his horses. It was screaming for its life. When he reached the source of the screams, he saw a huge, powerful animal resembling a giant hyena attacking the horse. Terry rushed over to fight the animal off, but it either evaporated into nothing or became invisible in front of his eyes. The only evidence that it had ever been there was the claw marks on the horse's skin. At night, on more than one occasion, Terry, his family, and visitors to the ranch saw humanoid figures walking around the property, disappearing into the darkness before anyone could properly identify what it was. Some thought that it could be Bigfoot. Others said that it was ancient human beings. All the witnesses did know was that the humanoid figures had dark black hair and were over 8 feet tall. If the Shermans weren't at the end of their wits by that point, they soon would be. One night, Terry spotted a strange glowing orb floating around the ranch outside. But before he could do anything about it, his 3 dogs bolted out the door towards it, chasing it into the night. Terry never saw what happened, but he did hear it. It was a sound no pet owner ever wants to hear. 3 yelps of agony and then silence. By this point, Terry and his family were too frightened to go out into the dark and look for those dogs. Instead, they waited until morning came. When Terry followed the dogs' tracks, they soon stopped in the dirt right alongside 3 greasy piles of mush. Terry never saw his dogs again, but it seemed clear that the glowing orb or something else had incinerated them. Terrified, the family knew that they had needed help, and help was just around the corner. The reporter most famously associated with the Skinwalker Ranch is George Knapp, a multi-award-winning journalist who was fascinated by the Shermans' claims. After interviewing the family and building on the work of reporter Zach Van Eyck, George Knapp wrote an article for the Las Vegas Press that brought the Sherman story much-needed attention. What made the ranch stand out more than anything was the sheer number of different paranormal phenomena happening there all the time. It was the only place where cryptids such as the hyena-looking creature and the potential Bigfoot sightings could be found alongside UFOs and poltergeist activity with such regularity. For this very reason, billionaire real estate tycoon Robert Bigelow bought the ranch from the Sherman family. Due to unrelated paranormal experiences he and his family had when he was a kid, Bigelow wanted to see if there really was anything to the Shermans' claims. For him, it was about using cutting-edge science to uncover any evidence of the paranormal if it did in fact exist. However, with the phenomena on the ranch exhibiting a trickster quality, that was going to require patience. The homestead on Skinwalker Ranch soon became a hive of activity for research scientists. The team was comprised of physicists, biologists, and parapsychologists, all sent there from the National Institute for Discovery Science. They set up security cameras, motion detectors, and other equipment in an attempt to find scientific evidence for what was going on there. They also built watchtowers across the property so that any human witnesses could record any first-hand experiences without coming to harm. Meanwhile, historians found descriptions of similar events in the region going back all the way to the 1700s and collated numerous testimonies from witnesses other than the Shermans, who knew that Skinwalker Ranch should be avoided at all cost. In a couple of instances, people believed that the area had caused the death of another local who had been exposed to a beam of light from one of the UFOs, only to die of cancer shortly after. It seemed that whatever was happening in the area, it had been going on for a long time, and it could prove deadly. But the main question was, could these researchers find out why it was happening? For more than 4 years, the scientists stayed at the ranch, and in that time they encountered some of the strangest phenomena yet. When a scientist looked out from one of the watchtowers at night, he realized that 2 yellow eyes were staring at him from a tall tree. There was something as large as a human in the branches, and it was observing the scientist. When the team rushed over to investigate, the thing was gone, but they did find claw marks on the ground beneath the tree. The imprints showed the presence of large talons, almost as if the thing in the tree was half humanoid, half predatory bird. A pattern soon emerged across the ranch. The entity or entities there seemed to know that they were being watched. They would appear when cameras were switched off for the most part, though some striking photos were taken. In one of the strangest, researchers captured an image across the ranch that showed large, towering skyscraper-like structures stretching out of the ground towards the mountains. They looked like the remnants of a faded human city or a close approximation of it. This image soon faded into nothing. In another instance, the scientists witnessed a floating beam of light one night that opened up just above the ground. To their horror, a humanoid creature climbed out of the light and then clawed its way along the ground into the tall grass. The light then disappeared. The scientists on the ranch are still convinced that what they saw was some sort of portal, but to where? And what's on the other side? Interestingly, some of the researchers reported hearing what sounded like machinery or an underground train moving deep beneath the ground, spurring suspicions that the government or other researchers were doing something down there that nobody else was aware of. After the first batch of researchers left the area after 4 years, they publicly stated that they were convinced there was something truly inhuman wandering around the ranch, and that it seems to be taunting those trying to capture evidence of it. Since then, there have been other research teams, but their findings have yet to be published. Rumors persist that even more frightening encounters have happened at the ranch since those days, and that they continue there even now. There are different theories to explain what's been documented at Skinwalker Ranch. One of the more popular theories surrounds the name of the place itself. The term Skinwalker comes from American Indian mythology. A skinwalker is a trickster entity or witch that can shapeshift and change its skin to look like other animals or people. It's often been seen shifting between being on all fours and walking upright, but it can be violent and deadly when it wants to be. The ranch is said to reside on Skinwalker Ridge. Some call this piece of land the Path of the Skinwalker. Many people believe that this is where the Skinwalker entity roams. In the local area of the ranch, folklore also states that anyone who digs into the ground will disturb the evil spirits that reside there. Could this be what people have encountered on the ranch? A haunting of epic proportions? When the witnesses saw the yellow portal open up and the humanoid creature crawl out of it, they mentioned that they could see a different patch of sky through the portal. This has led some to speculate that Skinwalker Ranch is a place where interdimensional beings enter our world. This ties into recent developments in the UFO community, where UFO sightings are increasingly deemed to be extra-dimensional rather than extraterrestrial. Of course, some have also suggested that due to the UFOs encountered on the ranch, that these are indeed aliens, studying not just the ranch but anyone who lives there. Until we find out more about the recent research teams and what they've discovered on Skinwalker Ranch, this place, nestled in the silence of northeast Utah, will remain shrouded in mystery. That is, unless one prediction comes true. You see, some researchers claim that the mysterious goings-on at Skinwalker Ranch are spreading like a disease. Whatever is coming into our world there, it's increasing its influence in the area. Some of those who previously visited the ranch even believe that when they left it to go home, something terrible followed them, and now they're being haunted. It seems that Skinwalker Ranch is infecting the world. The question is, just how far will its evil spread, and will it come to reach each of us? Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to join my Discord and join the community at discord.gg/MatthewSantoro, and be sure to also follow me on Twitch, where I go live daily at twitch.tv/MatthewSantoro. Both communities are a lot of fun and supportive, and I think you'll really love it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.